Ever wondered what it took to be a medieval knight? Spoiler alert, it wasn't just about swinging a sword and looking cool in armor. The harsh realities of survival in medieval times might just shock you. Try waking up at dawn, strapping 60 pounds of armor onto your body, and charging into battle with no guarantee you'll live to see lunch. No phones, no breaks, no second chances. Welcome to the brutal life of a medieval knight, trained from childhood, tested in blood, and bound by a code that could cost your life. The real question is, could you survive it? Let's find out. Becoming a knight wasn't a job you could quit at any time. It was a duty, and one that started before you could even lift a sword. At just 7 years old, noble boys were pulled from their homes, stripped of comfort, and enrolled as pages in the households of warlords. Their childhoods were traded for discipline, etiquette, and the earliest sparks of military training. Being a knight was never about just swinging a sword. It was a lifelong transformation, body, mind, and soul. A page's days were spent learning to serve, not only their masters, but a greater ideal. They learned how to ride, hunt, read, and recite prayers. They polished armor, memorized codes of conduct, and endured the sting of wooden swords across their backs when they got it wrong. By the age of 14, they became squires. That meant real training. Under a battle-hardened knight, think sparring sessions that ended in bruises, days spent learning the intricacies of mounted combat, and night after night caring for weapons and war horses. A squire wasn't just a student, he was a servant, a shadow, a protector in training. His master's survival and reputation often rested in his hands. If he was lucky and survived, he'd earn his knighthood in his early 20s. But it wasn't just handed over. It had to be earned through bravery in battle, loyalty in service, or sometimes by showcasing enough skill in a deadly tournament to impress the right lord. The dubbing ceremony was symbolic, a sword tapped on both shoulders. But behind that tap was a lifetime of pain, fear, training, and submission. And once you were a knight, that's when the real expectations kicked in. You weren't just a soldier, you were a walking symbol of an entire security system. You were expected to uphold chivalry, a code of honor that demanded courage, faith, loyalty, and courtesy, even as you crushed your enemies. You were required to protect the weak, obey your lord, serve your king, and honor the church. But here's the kicker. You were also expected to fight and kill with zero hesitation. Being a knight meant living in a constant state of readiness. Battles could erupt at any moment. Political alliances could change overnight. Your loyalty might be tested by bribes, betrayal, or even the church itself. One wrong move and your title, your land, even your life could be taken. Surviving as a knight meant far more than surviving the battlefield. You had to survive expectations, the pressure to be strong, pure, wise, merciless, and noble all at the same time would crush most modern minds. The sword and shield were heavy, but the real weight was what they represented. And that's where our journey begins. You've heard the legend, you've seen the armor in museums, but behind the myths were men, young, exhausted, loyal to a fault, who bled and broke for the code they swore to live by. Still think you've got what it takes? Let's get real. Start with the armor. On a good day, it weighed about 60 pounds. That's the same as carrying a loaded suitcase strapped to your body while trying to sprint, dodge arrows, and swing a steel sword. Knights trained to move like machines, but even the strongest struggled to breathe after long hours in the heat. Imagine baking inside a steel oven while getting pummeled from every direction. That was the reality of medieval knights. And battles, they weren't poetic duels or fair fights. They were chaos. Screams, mud, blood, your friends dying beside you. One wrong step, one broken strap, and you were gone. Trampled, stabbed, or crushed under a fallen horse. Off the battlefield, the danger didn't stop. Knights lived by the code of chivalry, a moral leash that dictated how they acted, spoke, and even thought. But this wasn't just etiquette. It was a survival tactic. Break it, and you didn't just face shame. You could lose your land, your title, or your head. Try showing mercy when you shouldn't. That could be seen as a weakness. Speak against your lord? That's treason. And then there were the expectations, constant training, political manipulation, the threat of invasion, the pressure to serve your church. protect your people, and never, ever appear soft. So what's the real challenge? You guessed right, survival. Not just in battle, but in reputation, in honor, and in duty. Knights didn't get breaks. They couldn't show fear. They lived every day under scrutiny, from their lords, their comrades, and even the peasants who depended on their strength. That's the world you're stepping into. The question is, could you last a day? Because training never stopped. Even seasoned knights practiced regularly. Because falling out of shape could mean falling in battle. They trained with swords, spears, maces, axes. They drilled combat moves on foot and on horseback. They practiced jousting not for fun, but to sharpen reflexes under pressure. Wrestling and unarmed combat were crucial too, because if you lost your weapon, your bare hands were your last defense. But strength wasn't enough. A knight had to live and breathe the code of chivalry, a strict set of values: bravery, loyalty, faith, humility, generosity, and honor. Knights were expected to protect the weak, defend the church, serve their lords faithfully, and treat noble women with reverence. But in practice, this code was a constant moral maze. You might be ordered to burn a village while protecting a noble's interests, or to kill an enemy who surrendered. Mercy and morality didn't always align with duty. Let's talk about the tournaments. You have heard so many tales of the competition. Part sport, part spectacle, part survival test. These were public events where knights showcased their skill and often settled real feuds. Yes, there were cheering crowds and prizes to win. But make no mistake, bones were broken, men were killed, and reputations were made or destroyed in the blink of an eye. For many knights, these tournaments were more terrifying than war. Daily life off the battlefield wasn't easier. Most knights had responsibilities on their land, collecting taxes, resolving disputes, and enforcing justice. You were expected to lead with wisdom and strength, even if you barely had time to breathe. Managing your estate could mean dealing with crop shortages one day, bandits the next, and your lord's impossible demands the day after. And then there was politics. Nobles schemed, alliances shifted, and betrayals happened behind closed doors. A wrong word or supporting the wrong lord could get you exiled or executed. You needed to be sharp, cautious, and constantly aware of who wanted your favor or your head. Let's not forget health. Medical knowledge was primitive. Infection could take your life after a minor wound. Your armor might save you in battle, but if it wasn't cleaned properly, it could poison your skin. Dental care? Non-existent. Mental health? No such concept. You were expected to push through pain, fear, grief, and trauma without blinking. And through it all, you had to keep up appearances. A knight who showed weakness, physical or emotional, risked being labeled unworthy. Reputation was everything. One mistake could haunt your family for generations. So yeah, knights were warriors. But they were also diplomats, landlords, bodyguards, politicians, and symbols of order, all rolled into one. They didn't just fight to survive. They lived on the edge, balancing honor, duty, and raw survival every single day. You still feel like there is nothing special about it than what you experience on a daily basis, right? Alright, let's crank up the intensity. Picture this. You, just as you are now, wake up in the year 1386. No warning, no warm-up. You're standing in the cramped barracks of a stone fortress. You're a knight, or at least everyone thinks you are. Your first breath is thick with smoke and sweat. There's shouting outside, horses screaming. You're not on a movie set. This is the real deal. And it's battle day. You're thrown a chainmail shirt, 40 pounds of cold, stiff iron rings. Takes 3 squires just to get it on. Then a padded gambeson, like a medieval oven mitt to stop your armor from slicing your skin. Then the breastplate, greaves, helmet, boots, sword. By the time you're fully dressed, your breathing is shallow and your shoulders ache. Now you're shoved into line, on a horse. And that horse, it's not happy to have a stranger on its back. You've never ridden one in your life, but you've got seconds to figure it out. No stirrups. Good luck. You tip sideways. Trumpets blare. The gate opens. And suddenly, you're riding into open chaos. With hundreds of other knights, banners flapping, arrows raining. You can't hear anything over the screaming. You can barely see through the helmet slit. Your visor fogs with sweat. Your sword feels like it weighs 100 pounds. And now, you're supposed to kill. A man charges at you, real steel, real hatred in his eyes. You raise your sword a second too late. He slams into you. You fall hard, wind knocked out. You're choking inside your armor. Nobody's helping. This isn't a team sport. This is survival. Now imagine that happening again and again, day after day. Sometimes it's a full-scale war. Sometimes it's a tournament and everyone's watching, including the noble who holds your land and your future in his hands. And here's where it gets darker. Your body, It's breaking. You've never carried this much weight or taken this much trauma. No painkillers, no physiotherapists, no mental health breaks. Your mind? It's not built for this. You can't Google survival tips or call for backup. You're expected to know, to act, to fight, or die. Even if you survive the battle, there's no guarantee of comfort. You sleep in a stone room with fleas. You drink wine because the water will kill you. You eat stale bread and salted meat. And if you get injured, pray the local barber surgeon doesn't cut off your leg just to be safe. Modern toughness? It doesn't stand a chance here. In the world of medieval knights, pain is normal. Silence is expected. Strength isn't optional, it's survival. By sunset, you're back in the barracks, shaking, bruised, half-conscious. You haven't eaten. Your armor is caked with blood, maybe yours. One question echoes in your head. How did anyone survive this? The better question, could you? So, what did it really take to be a medieval knight? It wasn't just about wearing armor or swinging a sword. It was discipline, loyalty, endurance, and pain, sharpened over a lifetime. From childhood training to bloody battlefield tests, knights were forged by hardship and duty. Every moment demanded courage. Every mistake could mean death or disgrace. They didn't have comfort. They didn't get second chances. But they stood for something bigger than themselves. A brutal code, a sacred cause, a legacy that still echoes today. Could you survive in their world? Maybe. But you'd need more than muscles. You'd need willpower, resilience, and a mind unshaken by fear. Now we want to hear from you. Could you handle the life of a medieval knight? The pain, the pressure, the battlefield? Drop your answer in the comments, and be honest. And if you enjoyed diving deep into the gritty truth behind history's most iconic warriors, don't forget to check out our other videos. We've got even more raw, real, and ridiculous stories from the past that'll blow your mind. Hit that subscribe button because the next tale gets even more intense.